Character is not what you say under the arc lights. It is what you are in the dark. It is in the confines of your home that you reveal the true quality of your foundation. The Bible also says, judge the tree by its fruit. Isn't it true that to a great extent, childhood experiences mold the marriage?
Sure. When newlywed couples, when they look at each other, they have a lot of positive feelings. But a little later, they end up in bitter feelings toward each other. So much so they think their spouse is a person or a devil without horns. They go to such an extent. Very often, couples have this feeling, they think their spouse is their enemy, but they fail to understand, but it's not their spouse who's their enemy, it is their own childhood wounds. In fact, the more wounds they have, the more they'll project these hurt feelings onto their spouse. So it's nice to deal with this childhood wounds in this episode.
Yes.
Well, we all know that children require a little discipline. Okay? Like when we read in Matthew chapter 7 verses 9 to 11, there Jesus says, "Would any one of you give a stone to your son when he asks for bread, or give him a snake when he asks for a fish? As bad as you are, you know how to give good things to your children. How much more then will your Father in heaven give good things to those who ask him?" So Jesus speaks about how parents all the time try to give good things to their children. But unconsciously, very often, parents transmit their own wounds onto the children. Well, disciplining is all the time good. Sometimes, parents, they try to discipline children, but sometimes children, they are also brilliant. They know how to give back. For example, a little girl, she was just playing with her mom. Suddenly she looked at her head and she said, "Ma, you have a white hair on the right side, a white hair on the left side. How did you get that?" Now, mom wanted to teach her a little lesson. So she said, "Whenever you don't obey your mommy gets a white hair." And she said, "See, this morning I asked you to do your homework, you didn't. And mom got a white hair. Then you opened the fridge, you were trying to have ice cream. I told you not to have it because you are having cold, you did not obey me. So now mom has got another white hair." So mom says, "Hereafter you got to obey your mom, right?" And this little girl thought for a while and she said, "Ma, look at grandma, she has got white hair all over. What did you do to your mom?" So they are a little sharp. Okay, disciplining children is all the time good. But sometimes, thinking that parents are disciplining children, very often they give their children stone instead of bread. I remember a particular lady, she told me this about her childhood. When she was 5 years old, one day she asked her mom, "Mama, how was I born?" So mom said something for the sake of fun. Sometimes grown-ups do this with children. Mom said, "Who said you were born to me?" "No, you were born to that mad lady who walks about on the streets. You were her child."
Hurtful, yeah.
The little girl, "Really? So how did I come to you?" She said, "You know what? When that lady gave birth to you, she bribed the nurse in the hospital and that person switched both of you. And she said, I gave birth to a son and that lady bribed the nurse and then you were brought to me." This was a little joke for mom. Sometimes we make fun of children like this. But in their world, it is totally a different message.
Shattering.
Exactly. That is a terrible abuse for that child. She said from then on, she could never trust her mom. She would all the time look at her mom with a suspicion. and she could never bond with her mom.
You're talking about disciplining like it is not too good. Spare the rod, spoil the child is what we hear. Same way it's quoted from the Bible. In the book of Sirach it says, if you have sons, chastise them, bend their necks from childhood. So, which part of this bending really affects their adulthood, destroys their marriage, and in fact shatters their adult life?
Sure. Well, the church all the time supports disciplining children. In fact, this particular passage you read, spare the rod and spoil the child, that is from Proverbs 13:24.
Yeah.
That actually encourages disciplining, but it doesn't encourage abuse. Very often, parents take children for granted. When I buy a certain commodity, I possess it. So I can use it any way I want. I can use it, I can abuse it. Nobody is going to question me. Very often, parents consider children as their property, as their wealth, as some goods they can use or abuse. They think they have every right to do whatever they want with children. Well, that is not true.
Right.
Friends, there are 4 types of abuses that children could have in any sort of upbringing. Now, parents think they are giving children bread, but unconsciously they give them stone. That is abuse. Some parents think that they are giving their children fish, but unconsciously they are giving them serpents. And now, why do they do this? Well, that's what they received from their parents, and they have very little choice about this. Whatever they have received from their parents, that's what they transfer them to children. So, church identifies 4 types of abuses. Again, I better explain this verse, Proverb 13:24, spare the rod and spoil the child. Very often this is interpreted in a very pejorative way. In fact, it doesn't refer rod to a punishing cane. But Proverbs says, discipline your child as a shepherd leads his flock.
Yeah.
Actually, it refers to a shepherd's
Rod,
staff. Yeah. Shepherd does not spank or brutalize a little one, sheep. Rather, he guides them with the help of the staff. And Bible says you discipline, you guide your children the way a shepherd guides his flock. So it is a Hebrew idiom the Old Testament uses. Friends, let's come to even this spare the rod. Very often people think with this you can simply brutalize children, beat them, spank them, cane them, and all that. It is not true. Researchers say the more children are given physical abuse, the more abusive they become later. Children who are brutalized, who are physically punished, who are given corporal punishment, later they tend to be either very anxious or very, very aggressive. The boys who were punished corporally, physically too much, they tend to be very abusive, very aggressive later. Girl children who are abused overly physically, they tend to develop self-hatred and a lot of anxieties when they grow. And even when they have to discipline others, they sometimes have recourse to this brutalizing. So, church is not for this sort of physical abuse. And then the second abuse is verbal abuse. What children need is appreciation, validation, affirmation. But most of the children, they receive more verbal abuse than verbal encouragement. A survey taken in India says parents criticize children this way. For every statement of praise or validation, there are 8 statements of criticism and put-downs. So that is totally unhealthy. And sure, the more parents put down children, later on, they are going to do the same thing to others. Whatever they have received, that's what they're going to give. Okay? And third sort of abuse is sexual abuse. We all know children are so innocent until they come of age. If they are exposed to sexual materials or sexual activities before they come of age, that is an abuse. And it could just devastate children. Any child that is exposed to sexual materials or sexual acts before they are even aware of such feelings, okay, that can devastate them. They develop abnormal life patterns later. And the fourth one is neglect. We all know children need affection, love, cuddling from mom, cooing, that physical touch, that bonding. They need appreciation from dad, attention from others. Now, when parents are too busy, okay, they neglect the needs of these children, and later on that will affect them. For example, I knew a couple who were working in Dubai. When this lady became pregnant, she was 7 months pregnant, she went to her boss, her manager, and said, "Sir, I want to go to India for my delivery because my mom is there." He said, "Sure, I can give you just 4 months maternity leave. You have to return before 4 months are over." So she came over to India. When the baby was born, she was with the baby hardly for a month. Then she left the baby with her mom. She went back to Dubai. Okay? And then I asked grandma how she took care of the baby. Now, grandma had a lot of land, 50 acres of land. She was a widow. She said, all that I could do to the baby was feed the baby, bottle feed the baby, and change the diapers. I couldn't do much more because I was a busy woman. Friends, now this girl has become so aggressive, so much so every day she gets into trouble with other girls in the school. She is very pugnacious. For little things, she becomes physical with other girls. She beats them, she hits them, and all that. So we all know how neglect can devastate a person. So these 4 kinds of abuses, they go deep into the mind of children, and they remain there, and it is almost permanent.
And they manifest after marriage.
Sure.
Right. Every day we receive hurts, wounds, painful experiences, but it is really the experiences, the wounds one receives as a child that leaves a lasting impression on our soul, our spirit. Is it true to say that this irrational behavior we see in so normal persons, suddenly they behave in a funny way, these streaks of madness or mental fixations, it all goes back to their childhood wounds?
Of course. When it comes to inner wounds, we have two terms. One is called manifest wounds, the other one is called latent wounds. Now, whatever wounds that is created in a child because of abuses, okay?
Neglect, physical abuse.
Physical, verbal, sexual, and neglect.
Right.
Okay. These ones, of course, they affect the baby, but they'll become latent wounds. They are repressed by children because the brain of the child realizes that it is not palatable, so it pushes it beneath the surface.
Right.
Okay. And then it looks like it is quiet for some time, but it sort of resurfaces at marriage. Especially after a period of infatuation, the moment they step into disillusionment, that is when all these childhood wounds will begin to surface. And now it becomes manifest wounds. That means that they will start openly attacking each other, hurting each other. But they are not quite aware of this. They are oblivious to this fact that it is the childhood wounds that are resurfacing at this moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, there's a couple, I'll call them Mary and John, Wonderful couple,
Good names.
newly married. They have a tremendous attraction toward each other. John, he realizes that within a couple of months, his wife was going to celebrate her birthday. He wanted to make it very special. And so he organized a surprise party for his wife.
Okay.
And then without the knowledge of his wife, he informed all the relatives and friends. He booked a room in a hotel, and he booked everything like catering, decoration,
Okay.
and all those things were done. Okay? Now he wanted to buy a gift for Mary, and he knew she was fond of gold rings. So he placed an order for a gold ring. And on the eve of her birthday, he went to that jeweler, he got the gold ring, and he wrapped it nicely. He came home, and the door was open, wife was very busy in the kitchen. Now he didn't want his wife to notice this gift, he wanted it a surprise gift.
So he hid it.
So he sneaked, he entered the bedroom, and he was looking for her handbag. He picked it up, he opened, and he kept this gift inside. Meanwhile, wife was in the kitchen. She heard this shoe sound, and she said, "Who's that?" So she came along. She looked into the bedroom, and she saw her husband meddling with her bag. Okay, actually, women can sense. They have this sixth sense.
Intuition.
Yeah, intuition.
Yeah.
Even though husband was doing everything secretly, she could sense. So she just wanted to pull his legs. So she looked at her husband, and he said, "Hey, thief, what you're doing there?" She said it's just for fun's sake. You know what happened? He just dropped the bag. He came to her and gave her such a heavy slap, and he said, "How can you call me your or a thief? Am I not your loving husband?" Now that slap was so heavy, she developed a sprain right away, and her head got twisted, and she had to walk about like this. She right away called her parents, and she said, "I cannot live with this animal." She said, "I'm going to come home."
Yeah.
And the very next day, instead of having birthday party, they were having Third World War. It was intense, terrible fight. And so much so, he called off the party.
Although he was a loving husband,
Yeah,
he behaved in this angry moment, flash of anger for this silly remark.
Sure. At that moment, he became an animal. He hit her so hard. Now, the parents were perplexed, the parents of both the spouses. And they said, "Why don't you go to a counselor?"
Yeah.
So when they approached a counselor, this lady said, "I cannot live with this animal because nobody so far touched me this way.
Right.
And see, if he can harm me this way right at the beginning of the marriage, what do you think he wouldn't do later?" She said, "I cannot live with this man." And when the counselor looked at John said, "You know what, she shouldn't have used that word, thief. How can she use that? Am I not her loving husband?" And then the counselor figured out something. He looked at John and he said, "John, what really pushed your button?" He said, "You know what, when the moment she used that word thief, that pushed my button. I lost my balance. And I didn't know what I did at that moment. Later I came to know I had slapped her." He said, "So far, I had never touched anybody like this. I'm not a physically abusive man, but I don't know why I did that to her. But still, she shouldn't have used that word, thief." Once again, the light bulb went on for the counselor. He said, "John, do you remember any childhood event connected with this word, thief, that hurt you very badly?" He said, yeah, I remember one particular event that hurt me very badly. It's around this word thief." He said, "Can you describe that?" Then John said, he was an 8-year-old boy. One evening, he was playing cricket with his friends. It was a holiday, and he was having fun time. And they were trying to wind up around 8 p.m. There was a petty shop nearby. That shopkeeper was just then, closing his shop, and he was going home. Meanwhile, the friends of John, they told him, "Hey, John, there's some fun activity. What? You know, that petty shop has got a planks instead of walls. You know, the third and fourth plank, there's a lot of gap. You can put your hand inside and there's a candy bottle. You can open, take some candies. This boy said, oh, no, stealing is not good. They said, hey, let's do it for fun's sake, man. And then he said, well, if you want, why don't you do it? And then they all said, no, we are all bigger boys. Our hands are very big. We tried. Our hands are not going inside. So, John, why don't you try? The boy refused, but still they lifted him. They took him very close to the shop. They said, come on, try this. Because of the peer pressure, he wanted to please his friends. So he pushed apart third and fourth planks, and they said, come on, put your hand inside. He put his hand inside. They said, do you feel there's a bottle over there? He said, yeah, come on, open the lid. He opened. They said, come on, take some candies. He took some candy. They all said, hey, fantastic, come on, take more, take more. And the boy was busy taking candies. Meanwhile, the shopkeeper, on his way back home, realized that he forgot to pick up a book from the shop. So he came back. As he was returning, he saw somebody meddling with the shop. So he came running. And the other boys, the moment they saw the shopkeeper, they all fled. And this poor little John did not see the shopkeeper because he was busy with this activity. And the shopkeeper came to him, caught hold of him, thrashed him left and right. He dragged him to his home, knocked at the door. When his dad came out, he said, sir, see what your son was doing? What? He said, your son was stealing these candies from my shop. Really? My son? Stealing? Wow. He started hitting his son left and right, kicked him. He was battered and bruised so badly. Now from that time onwards, dad started punishing this boy and abusing him very often. Whenever things were missing, he would simply call John and hit him. Actually, John never did those things. See how this boy was so brutalized because of that act. You know, these sort of painful events don't vanish right away. Instead, they go deep inside, they are repressed, and they become latent wounds. Okay? Yes. In fact, when they grow up, they are not even aware of this wounds.
So the boy's father could have been more sensitive in dealing with.
But he brutalized. And he used this word thief very often. And dad said, you are a professional thief. So this boy developed a terrible complex or a wound, or we even say mind fixation around this thief.
Right.
So when Mary told him, just for fun's sake, she wanted to pull his legs and she said, you thief, what you are doing there? In fact, she sensed that he was actually hiding some gifts. But she said for fun's sake, you know, but when she used that word thief, that pushed the button.
Yes.
That triggered the wounds inside and it became manifest wound. He right away went, slapped his wife. So friends, now do you see how childhood wounds could resurface later?
Yes, Father.
Okay. But John was not aware that it was the childhood wound that flared up. Rather, he thought his wife was
calling him a thief.
Exactly.
Addressing him.
And he blamed her for behaving this way. And he was not at all aware of the fact that it was his child wound that came in this form. We call this mind fixation. In fact, we all have a lot of mind fixations like this. And all the wounds that we receive from childhood, we sort of bury them, and then these ones surface later, especially in a marriage. Recently, I had a couple who came to me for counseling. Wife asked me this question. Let me call this couple also John and Mary. Mary asked me this question. She said, Father, I am a woman. John's mother is a woman. Both are very important to him. Like both of us are like his two hands or two eyes. But Father, very often he adores his mom, but he abuses me thoroughly. So why should this man do this? Okay. Well, I was looking for some sort of childhood wounds. So when I had a private conversation with John, I asked him about his childhood. He said he had a very, very, very domineering, overbearing mom who all the time punished him physically, verbally. and through neglect also, because she was a widow, she was a breadwinner. So the only way she communicated her love was by beating children, by verbally abusing them, and through neglect. Okay? Now, he received so much of abuse from his mom. Of course, I told you children repress them also much. Okay? But as a teenager, or even after his college studies, he would not even speak to his mom. Before his marriage, he went for confession. He told the confessor that he was hating his mom. Confessor said, "You know what? Your mom is like God. She's representing God. How can you ever do this to your mom? Come on, forgive your mom right away. Come on, be good to her." So he right away went back to his mom, asked a pardon, then he was very good to his mom. But he was not aware that he had actually, instead of forgiving his mom, he had repressed all his negative feelings toward mom. So what happened after marriage, all these repressed feelings, they expressed themselves, and his target now was his wife.
Yeah.
Friends, that happens to most of the couples. Any sort of negative feeling towards parents, they get repressed. And then after marriage, this is called unconscious marriage. People unconsciously express those latent feelings, and now the new target is their spouse, husband or wife.
So, Father, these wounds you receive in childhood, it grows in you.
Yeah.
And as you say, marriage is built on love. If somebody has not experienced love, he will only give that what they have experienced. It could be hate, it could be abuse, it could be verbal abuse. So that marriage will be exactly what he behaves is exactly how he experienced during his childhood.
Exactly. So whatever a person had received in the childhood, that's what they are going to give even in their married life. If they had received a lot of love, now they are going to offer love.
Yes.
If they were brutalized, well, there could be a lot of domestic violence in the family. If they received a lot of physical abuse, so he would get vicarious happiness by punishing his wife. Or a child that received a lot of verbal abuse from parents, they become, Dr. Nag or Mrs. Nag. She keeps on nagging her husband. Or people who had received sexual abuse, they also, like men, they might do the same thing with their wife. They also say, some people, they rape their own wife. Or they could have external affairs and all that. Or they could, women who were sexually abused, they develop some sort of phobia toward even sex. Any sort of physical contact is a phobic experience for her. Same way, neglect. Children who were neglected, they develop something called a fear of intimacy. I remember a particular lady who never experienced intimacy with parents because she grew up in a hostel. Parents were working in the Gulf. They put this girl in the hostel. Even when she went home, parents did not have time for the child. So she was a loner. Okay? Now she has this fear of intimacy.
Okay.
Whenever husband expresses love, she unconsciously hurts him and pushes him away. But later on she was complaining that husband was not good and all that. But she had this fear of intimacy. So it is so vivid that how the latent wounds from childhood, they keep on resurfacing in the married life.
Counseling, it got to keep on the process till he gets rid of, both of them get rid of their hurt child.
Exactly.
It takes a lot of time.
Yeah, that's what we say in marriage. When couples come to us for counseling, we say, hey, come on, now don't target each other, rather, can you just take some time away, some space away, go back to your childhood, get healed of your childhood wounds. Any person who gets healed of their childhood wounds, they become very loving toward their spouses. I have seen this over the years.
Yes, Prabhu.
There were some couples who were not willing to change at all. They kept on targeting their spouse. And they were going from bad to worse, worse to worse situation. But there were couples who were open enough. They were willing to go back to their childhood. They were openly sharing their vulnerable nature. And then they understood each other. They got healed. And they became extremely good, loving couples later.
Which means the next generation is saved.
Yeah. So we all have a very good parent, God, and He protects us. And our biological parents unconsciously abused us. And now we continue to express those wounds onto others we come across every day. So shall we go back to God, hold on to this God, and ask this God, our good shepherd, to heal our wounds, and then let God be our good shepherd, our good parent. May God heal our wounds so that we might become healed healers. May the married couples be healed healers. Hosea chapter 11 verses 1 to 4 goes this way. I loved Israel when he was a child. Out of Egypt I called my son. But the more I have called, the further have they gone from me, sacrificing to the Baals, burning incense of the idols. Yet it was I who taught Ephraim to walk, taking them by the arms. Yet little did they realize that it was I who cared for them. I led them with cords of human kindness, with leading strings of love, and I became for them as one who eases the yoke upon their neck and stoops down to feed them. And we pray, God, our wonderful counselor, God, our perfect parent, thank you for choosing us from our childhood. Thank you for calling us by good names. You knew us before even we were formed in our mother's womb. You have called us. You have consecrated us. And Lord God, in spite of you being our good parent, somehow we have received a lot of wounds in our childhood. They have gone beneath the surface, and now they keep on surfacing, and we keep targeting everybody around us. Lord God, we ask your special intervention at this moment. Descend upon all the couples. Make them realize that they are pushing each other's buttons, and the unconscious trigger is their childhood wounds. Lord God, may they not target each other with express wounds. Rather, may they, with your help, become aware of their childhood wounds. May they have recourse to your mercy, to your shepherding care, and may everybody here be healed of their wounds. Lord God, come into our darkness, dispel it, and make us children of the light. We ask this in the name of Jesus our Lord.
Amen.
Amen.